And welcome to episode 37 of Mount Hope Sports Complex. Talk sports to me. I'm your host, the sports guru. This week we have had an incredible series titled The Coach's Corner. In this week's series, we have heard from legendary coaches such as Rob Buechler, Kevin Pickrell, Berto Allen, and the list goes on and on. Coach Randy Casey was our guest last night. Tonight, we will be joined by NAIA longtime head coach, Coach Ken French, who is the head coach for many years at the University of Rio Grande. Welcome again to episode 37. To me, I'm your host, the sports guru. In our Coach's Corner, we have talked about several different things this week. We have talked about leadership. We have talked about patience. We have talked about dedication. We have talked about hard work. We have talked about commitment. We have talked about resilience. We have talked about how focused you must be. We have talked about being firm, but not letting your guard down for your players, but letting them know that you're vulnerable. And in order to achieve any level of succeeding, you have to obtain all these qualities. These are all things that I will talk to Coach Ken French about as he comes on in just a few minutes. All syndications of this podcast can be heard at Spotify, Breaker Radio, Radio Public, Castbox, Google Podcast, Apple Podcast, Pocket Cast, and you've got it, Anchor.fm. Please follow us at Twitter at TalkSportsToMe1, Instagram at TalkSportsTM, and Facebook. Something that we've talked about this week, and we've talked about at length, is that how when you are a coach, you cannot just be a coach. You also have to be a teacher. I think it's missed a lot of times in terms of there's a difference, and in certain part of the room will explain to you friendship with a man that has spent 23 years at the collegiate level, 14 as a head coach. He's had 3 NAIA All-Americans. He's got a 97% graduation rate. He's had multiple teams be selected as teams national champions of character, and he is a man that puts integrity and ethics and doing things the right way above all else. And we will get into our conversation tonight about some of that and about how beneficial it is to the student athlete, but how sometimes it can be unefficient. So I have a couple of questions for him in terms of that. He is a family man. Been married to his lovely wife for a long time, and they have 2 lovely children, both very intelligent. How that is ran and operated. We'll dig deep into French.
Me all right, I guess. This is we went a couple weeks and that kind of thing, but we're everybody safe. Everybody else is, and hoping that it'll be over with soon, or at least we can start getting back to somewhat what we consider normal, in the near future.
I did share in Kentucky is allowing summer sports to start on June the 15th, so youth summer sports, and so that's a step in the right direction in terms of getting the kids back active. That's one of the things I've been concerned about is it's gotten 10 times worse since the quarantine. First thing I want you to do is I want you to take us back to your youth and how sports initially became a part of your life.
Well, I think the norm was, back when I was growing up, I'm a little bit older than you are, but, it was pretty much the same for you as well. You played just about every sport that you could during that time that the sport was going on. And, when I was 6 years old, I started playing football, basketball, and then started later playing baseball and ethics and moral compass. And, I wanted to go to a basketball camp and I wasn't old enough. So said I was 10 years old so I could get in. At that camp, it's where I actually fell in love with the game of basketball and just the experiences. And, I was a part of that camp from when I was 10 years old all the way throughout. And then, it ended. And then I got the opportunity to kind of start a camp very similar with my own, touch and flair to it and different things to it when I became the head coach at Rio. But, it was those experiences and being around those people, it shaped me, it molded me, made me, helped develop me. Those people that I interacted with were some of the most influential.
What that was like. You still in high school and against.
I think it's one of those all the high schools participated and that kind of, and through the basketball camps and compare yourself and see where you're at and see what level you're playing at. Different because everybody did go sport to sport and play. You played football during football, you played basketball during basketball season, and you played baseball during baseball season. And usually during the summer, baseball was a prevalent sport. But I chose to. When I was younger, I wanted to play basketball a lot. I passed up playing on all-star teams when I was younger and stuff as far as baseball went, so I could go to basketball camp, and that was my decision. And when I was in high school, I was a very average player, maybe even below average, just because of my size and skinny kid and small. And I graduated a year early. I graduated when I was 17. It was something that I wanted to do. I grew like 3 or 4 inches, and it was got to meet a lot of people at Fishburne at the military school and national players, from Virgin Islands and stuff.
Is that prep school does for that it was initially set up for, and I talked to. It's the way that I came up with the flow on how I was going to put this series together was I wanted to talk to 2 successful high school coaches, and then I wanted to talk to a prep school coach, which I talked to Coach Casey and I talked about last night. Was people use prep school for the wrong reasons a lot of times now because there's so many of them. So, kids are going to prep schools now thinking that going to a prep school is going to get them a Division I offer, but they're not going to prep school.
Themselves, it's glorified. When I was coming to Hargrave, and they actually had campuses and buildings, and you had to go through the cadet life and all that kind of thing. But today it's changed. It's changed dramatically, and some families and some recruits, they have a misconception of what it is, and some have been taken advantage of, and some have taken advantage of the system the way it is now. I would agree with that 100%.
Right. One of the things that the old school military schools did was teach discipline and make you, in a sense, military-minded. And I don't mean military-minded in terms of being ready to go out and go on the front line and fight. That and being or not, there's a consequence, and not being greedy with success and that you have established at Fishburne.
Still remember it to this day. You have a clear at Fishburne. It was a cadet does not. I've kind of always carried that with me, and we had to have formations, and you march to breakfast, and then you have chapel, you go to class, and you march to lunch, and then you have a formation in the afternoon to go march to dinner after your practices and that kind of stuff. So it's very, very regimented, very structured. But it does teach you discipline. You get up early in the morning, you got to clean your room, you got all that stuff. You go through all of it, and it was very beneficial for me. I needed it. I was probably even I was probably immature, wasn't ready to go to college. And had I not gone to Fishburne, I wouldn't be as successful as what I am. It helped mold me 3 years. Those disciplines I carry with me.
That just defeats the whole design for, to give a kid that that intermediate window between leaving home with parents and going to college on your own, with still having structure but not being with your parents. And like a lot of these prep schools have prep school coaches that aren't much older than the kids and really don't care what the kids are doing. Their concern is their next stop, and so I'm not a fan of prep school. I'm gonna throw that out there. That isn't a military, that doesn't have a military base. Basketball prep schools are not a good look, in my opinion.
I agree.
Walk us through your coaching stops, the people that have provided you those man in your life that you helped and then end up helping you. And so who are you can tell us about him stops along the way?
Fishburne, and and it used to be the old Stu Aberdeen, then it became the campus. Working that camp, the people, those coaches that I just mentioned on the camp, Herb Stevens, Bill Burrows, Charlie Cogdell, everybody that was on staff. But when I first went to the camp, I had a manager from Marshall University who was my first coach at the camp. His name was Ed Fry. And Coach Fry, his first, I don't know that it was his first, but he ended up being a head coach at Huntington St. Joe. He coached at a couple of different high schools as assistant and that kind of thing. He was an assistant at St. Joe. He ended up being at school in Huntington, West Virginia. Cut my teeth on 11 straight weeks of summer camp. And that's how I met a lot of my network and the people that I interact with now. And it's just those relationships are all built around basketball, and you've heard me say it. My high school coach said it. I picked it from him. I use it. But if you're good to the game will be good to you.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think this game has been very good to me, and it will hopefully continue to be.
We just talked a lot about relationships. How have those quality, trustworthy, dedicated, committed relationships benefited you throughout your career?
Obviously, I was going through a difficult time, when we made the transition. At Rio, reach out to me consistently. Basketball hoop fan, the Bill Burrows, the Charlie Cogdells, yourself, Bonnie Jones, so forth, and they're the ones that are reaching out, and because they've gone through it, they know what it's like, and that's part of being that family and being there for each other.
Tim Chadwell, who I talk about a lot on the show because of my relationship with him. He's the only person in Brown County to ever have played Division I, coached a Division I, and birthed a Division I. Now, our county's not very big, but he's never done that. And that doesn't make or define who he is, but what it does is say that like there's a reason that that's happened. and he's a really good friend. Had a blunt is that and called one of your strongest maintain culture, maintaining that high quality culture.
I think it goes back to the 4 pillars. I tell guys all the time, when they're coming into our program, I want them to develop as young. Foremost, I want you to get your degree, and we're going to teach you how to study and create. You may not be everybody's not a 4.0 student, but whatever your maximum capacity, if it's 2.5, 2.8, then great. We're going to get you to where you can, perform a faith and open themselves up to, Jesus Christ and our Lord and Savior. And had they not been on our program, they probably wouldn't have had the ability to be exposed to that.
Right.
But,
right.
We try to develop young men socially, athletically, and spiritually. And, everything we do is through that. We may have a lot of standards, but we only had one rule, and it was never do anything to embarrass the institution, this program, or using it. And, we just went from that and need a hug. Some guys need both.
And something that I noticed at your camp that I didn't notice at other camps is they work as hard day in and day out as you do. And it's not just during camp week, it's every day. And their main objective is to make those players of yours feel like they're never too far from home and that they've always got somebody to talk to. And there were players that you may not have had the greatest relationship with because some of the choices.
The saying that I've always said is you got to find people that are for what you're for. And it starts with my wife, Tanya, and I say it all the time, joke and that kind of stuff, but there's only 2 kinds of coaches' wives, and they're great ones and exes, and she's a great one. And, and it's her buy-in, she's in it. Me, it's a partnership, it's one of those things that we couldn't have had the success that we did, especially from a camp standpoint, or developed. And that's kind of how I approached it. I treated them just like I would treat my own son, when they went through, decision making and may have screwed up or whatever it was. And I think that they respected that. They knew that I was going to be brutally honest with them. And, it's sometimes guys get it. Sometimes guys don't, and sometimes they don't see it until 4, 5, 6 years later, maybe more. But, it was an unbelievable run. And, it's one of those things that it would not have meant as much, and it wouldn't have been as special if it wasn't for my family. And
it wasn't the camp that brought me back every year. It wasn't the atmosphere that brought me back every year. Those are things that I couldn't have found anyplace else because it's the only one in the country like it. It was Miss Coach's food, the cooking on the first night and the leadership from her throughout the week in the areas of the things that she was in charge of, from registration to cooking for us. Her camp has changed me. If you talk to my mom, if you talk to my uncle, if you talk to my grandparents, they're like, the first week that you came back from there, you changed. You've never been the same. Like my family and my friends and people that know me, the first time that I came back from hard work camp. And the way that I came about being at hard work camp was there was a basketball tournament in White Oak, and I had put together a basketball team that in my mind, I would have never known anything about it. And he is a very special person to me, but I also know he's a very special person to you and to your family. So let's talk about the impact that he had on your program as a player and as an assistant coach, and how important was he to the program, the program's progress throughout his tenure?
Well, as players, that whole group was special that we brought in. And, he was there my first 3 years as a player. And so blessed to have him in our program, and he's like another son for us. And just the relationship, and he's moved on and has started his life, has a beautiful family and that kind of thing. But it's always been built on the foundation of respect. I respected those guys where they came from and who they were as individuals, and I think that they respected what I was trying to do and helping them.
Our basketball circle, but we keep contact with him is Terry Jackson. Randy Casey shouted out Terry Jackson last night, and he's somebody who always says it's bigger than basketball, and people may like feel a certain type of way about Terry and what he does, but at the end of the day, like, he promotes kids, and
I guess it's ran its course. We were able to get 14 phenomenal years out of it, and hopefully we'll be able to duplicate it or do something similar to that. The goals will be the same. It'll never be exactly the same, but the goal will be the same, is to create that environment, that experience, try to do it somewhere else.
This show is not about me. It's always about my guests and my listeners, but I'm, with me being the person that does the show, I speak from my with so much good instruction. I was fascinated by the fact that the games were competitive. I was fascinated with the fact that if it rained, we still played outside, and there was no fast break. I was fascinated with the fact that kids played basketball until 9 o'clock at night, from 9 in the morning till 9 at night, with a couple hours worth of breaks for lunch and dinner in the middle. I was fascinated with the fact that people would go to work and come after work and sit in lawn chairs out in the concrete and in the heat to watch their kids compete at a basketball camp. Even if you have the golden seal of approval, you have to have the right people in place to help that run that smoothly. I mean, it runs smoothly. And from like my third or fourth year, I just always wanted to be a job. I had all these jobs selling cars, all these jobs in the classrooms, and all the jobs that I had that paid a whole lot of money. I never had any aspirations on being a boss in. I wanted to be a commissioner at Hard Work Camp, though. And so I continued to work hard and work hard and work hard and probably annoy the crap out of you and continue to just build relationships and develop and culturalize myself to being part of your culture. Like, I was taking the culture that I was learning from camp and bringing it and implementing it in what I was doing on a day-to-day basis.
You first and foremost, you got to have good people, and you got to have people. The best thing about most leaders, the biggest attribute you can have as a leader sometimes is knowing when to follow. So you got to have some people to follow the lead of how the camp's supposed to go. And you got to have those people that it means something to. I was very, very fortunate enough early on that, Coach McInnes came on staff. Heath McInnes came on staff with me. And then he didn't work at Rio anymore. He started, coaching high school, went back to coaching high school. But he to be around and share the experience. The Charlie Coglow, Bill Burrows, Gary Hines, Sam Kokenauer, those guys. And then, the commissioners and, our last set of conversations that you get to have either as staff or campers when you're in the cafeteria, eating lunch. Sitting at a table, or when you're, waiting to get your pizza, or, it's after camp and you're dead tired and you can't move and you're sitting beside somebody else, you just start talking, and, it's unbelievable how close you can become in just a week's time, because you're all going through the same things and you're all experiencing things. But the one thing you do have in common is you love the game of basketball. Sad thing that we've got to figure out a way to keep it going and develop and keep it. It's just like everybody that's on staff right now, the 4 commissioners, Schmack, and myself. We got our own, group text messaging. and we made nobody will post anything for a month or whatever it may be. And then those relationships are just, it's what it's all about.
Something you talk about a lot, you spoke on it tonight, one powerful something that happens to one of the kids or in one of the kids' families or in one of the kids' lives or, the one year I had about enough. I was fed up. It was Wednesday. I was tired. I think I was coaching. It was my last year coaching, or it was my last year coaching or first year as commissioner. Whatever it was, I was fed up. I was tired. And all the guys in my league, the NCAA, are all your incoming freshmen, a lot of them. So they're either just finished being freshmen or they're incoming freshmen, or they're past campers. And you just got to sit on them all week. You got to sit on them. I got to sit on them all week. And I was just fed up and I was tired. And then the letter comes. I have a huge following.
Well, I think it's simple. There's no magic formula. It's just doing things right. And it's, I have parents ask me, like, how do you get them to line up like that? How do you get them to be quiet? Well, it's expectations and execution. I make it crystal clear what the expectation is. This is how we're going to do things. This is how you're going to be. And then they execute up to that level. If those are the expectations, those kids will do it. Some of them are, at some point, you're going to have conflict. At some point, you're not going to be happy. But I think it just comes back to having the right people and doing things right. And the kids respected it. It wasn't fake. They knew they were going to get pushed, knew what was coming. They knew what was ahead for them. And, they embraced it, and I think it's just that thing of it doesn't matter where you're at. If you're doing things right, everything will work out and you're going to have something special for that.
And I don't see it.
It is. I think we all, even yourself, myself, all of us, whether we're adults working in a job or kids at a camp or people, kids on a team, I think we all perform better when we're encouraged. When somebody's positive, when somebody tells you, you're doing something right. Hey, keep it going. You're doing all the right things. Hey, it's going to pay off. Or we all are toughest when we have somebody with us, and encouraging us. Work camper can find a way to continue to work on your game. And the thing that they're going to miss is from hard work camp was more than just basketball.
Right.
You're talking about tuck your shirt in, don't walk on the grass. You were getting that discipline and that kind of thing. And it was fun. It was in a fun environment.
Manner. Yep.
Picking up trash and that kind of stuff. And I think my thing would be good to the game will be good to you. If basketball is important to you and you're wanting to make your team, next year, you're wanting to start next year, you're wanting to be on varsity or whatever your goal is, whatever your mission is, your habits have to reveal the mission. If I'm sitting here and I'm a guy and I'm saying, hey, I want to make work, your habits of what you're doing every day need to reveal the mission that you're on to whatever goals you want to accomplish.
Absolutely. So some of our listeners may know and some of our listeners may not know, but you will not return to the University of Rio Grande for next season. You had a fabulous career, and the amount of success that you have is valued, appreciated, and honored by your student athletes and their families for sure. And at the end of the day, that's really what it's about, is what you did for the people that that university during your time. What is next for Coach French?
Well, that's a good question. First and foremost is I have to practice what I preach. I always talk to my guys about next play. What's next? You had a turnover. What next play? You got to move to the next play, and that's what I've had to do. I'll be honest. I don't sugarcoat anything. It was heartbreaking. It broke my heart. I have faith in that. And, once we land on our feet somewhere, then we'll figure out, will establish the same type of foundation built on the same morals and the same core covenants and the same, pillars of development and that kind of thing. But, then we'll start looking at, what camp situation can we still come back and, maybe around here that, we're just waiting on that opportunity.
You have an exceptional support system. Men who have all the men, Coach Burrows, Coach Coggle, Coach Fry, Coach Kokenauer, Coach Himes, all the guys that you mentioned before. When you have people like that backing you and in your corner, it would be easy to feel invincible in a sense, because those guys are like as solid as they come. Like Burrows and Codgle and those guys are a solid. Fry. Those guys are uncomfortable situations. So I'm going to put you in an uncomfortable situation. What qualities, culture traits, and philosophies will a new college, university, or institution be getting when you acquire that new job that we all know is coming?
I think it's the family atmosphere. I think it's doing things right, but you're getting a servant leader. You're getting somebody that is going to, serve the program, serve those players. I've never wanted anything from my players. I've always wanted things for my players. They've all been in my corner. They're all disappointed, but it's life. It's like I said, you got to go next play. And it did break my heart, but it fixed my vision. There's some things that I see better now. There are things that I'll do better now, but the one thing that will remain the same is how I value relationships, and the relationships that I have with coaches, my staff, relationships that I have with the players.
Right. Takes personal qualities. Some of the qualities that the coach must inherit to be successful in the field of coaching are as follows. You got to have leadership qualities. You got to have patience. You got to be willing to work hard. You got to be dedicated. You got to be committed. You got to be resilient. You got to be focused. You got to be firm. But you got to be flexible. But you can't break. And most importantly, you got to be loving.
He's coaching youth leagues and he starts the Babe Ruth baseball league and stuff, and getting down there and just the pride that he took in putting the flag up, for the national anthem or whatever it was. The resiliency and the toughness of my mom and just how they raised me and that kind of stuff. From them.
Right. Yeah.
And it's just, everybody is, especially this day and age, it's my father, but, there were a lot of people who made an impression upon me, from the youth level all the way up. And, things have changed now that, I'm sure it was probably the same when you were in school. When I was in school, some of the best teachers were coaches.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And they made an impact on me. Ron Terry and Jody Burgess and those Phil Davis, those guys were not only good teachers, but they were great.
I have to show you that 2 + 2 is 1, 2, 3, 4. Coaches who are instructors just say, put the paper in front of you and say, do this problem. And coaches who are teachers typically are the people that teach life lessons. Coaches who are instructors are typically people who just instruct people on how to be successful in whatever it is that they're doing. So if you coach basketball, any good coach that's a teacher could just about teach or just about coach any sport Sunday, just because I need that Sunday feel of excitement and adrenaline that I get when that campus is full of kids that are excited about what we're excited for. Typically what I do is I try to take a couple of notes from things that I pick up from our conversation. One of the things is Be for people who are for what you're for. Another one of the things is treat people and respect people.
You asked what was next for me. One of the things that I will say is I'm a coach, and I'm going to coach.
Mm-hmm.
I want to continue coaching. I've had a lot of people, talk about, hey, why don't you go be an athletic director, do this, do that, and I don't want to. That's not where I'm at right now. Now, 5-10 years from now, could that change? Maybe. But I'm a coach, and I want to coach, and I want to continue to create these experiences that